Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking Joseph Ratzinger's highly complex and honestly completely fascinating theological framework on world religions. Whether you're already deeply familiar with his work as Pope Benedict XVI, or you're just really into theological philosophy, you know Ratzinger's approach to how Christianity interacts with other faiths is, well, incredibly rigorous. So we're going to break down his perspective using the exact academic frameworks he spent his life developing. Let's get right into it. We start with a really provocative paradox that kind of defines our entire journey today. Think about it. How can a religion claim exclusive truth while authentically engaging in dialogue for peace? You know, in our modern pluralistic world, the instinct is often to just blur the lines between faiths to keep the peace. Just smooth everything over, right? But Ratzinger firmly believed that watering down your own identity is actually the absolute wrong approach to achieving genuine unity. This tension brilliantly illustrates his early hesitations. Ratzinger actually chose not to attend the famous 1986 Assisi interreligious meeting convened by Pope John Paul II. Why? He was afraid it might look like a supermarket of interchangeable faiths. But here's the fascinating part. In 2002, following the immense trauma of the 9/11 attacks, he went. He clarified that attending wasn't about affirming an artificial equality, an equality he firmly believed just does not exist, but it was about a shared pilgrimage for peace. To really understand how he arrived at that super nuanced position, we're going to rely on some detailed scholarly analysis, specifically the work of Pablo Blanco Sarto. Sarto meticulously maps out how Ratzinger's worldview doesn't just float around in abstract piety, it actually rests on distinct, deeply interconnected intellectual pillars that he built over decades of rigorous academic and pastoral work. To make this massive academic deep dive accessible, we'll navigate his thought through 5 key pillars. The Assisi dilemma, reason, faith, and logos, the bond with Judaism, Christianity and other religions, and finally, dialogue from truth. Starting us off, Section 1, the Assisi dilemma, peace without compromise. To explore exactly how Ratzinger sought peace without giving an inch on Christian identity, he famously pointed to the historical figure of Saint Francis of Assisi. He noted that Francis didn't achieve his legendary peacemaking with the Sultan by somehow abandoning his Christian faith. No. Instead, Francis found true peace by fully embracing Christ's nonviolent love. Ratzinger argued that it was only when Francis was defeated, suffering, and totally rejecting the violence of the Crusades that he truly understood Christ. The big takeaway here? Walking the path to peace doesn't mean you should be terrified of losing your identity. Actually, that's precisely when you find it. Moving right along to Section 2, reason, faith, and logos, the filter of the cross. When looking at how Ratzinger connects faith with reason, we really have to rewind to the 1960s. Back then, there was this hugely popular theological idea by Karl Rahner called the anonymous Christian. The basic idea was that people could essentially be Christians without explicitly knowing it, basically bypassing explicit faith. Well, Ratzinger pushed back hard on this. He argued that just labeling everyone an anonymous Christian completely glosses over the actual fundamental differences between world religions. He believed we need to rigorously examine these structures, rather than just using a blanket assumption that, hey, deep down they're all secretly the same. And that leads directly to his incredible sieve analogy, the idea of the yes and no. According to Ratzinger, Christianity looks at other cultures and religions and says a big, enthusiastic yes to the natural human search for God. The early church fathers actually call these the seeds of the word. But, and this is a big but, it also issues a firm, uncompromising no. It strictly filters everything through the objective reality of the cross, explicitly rejecting false idols. So it's a critical adoption. It is never a naive or unconditional acceptance. Next up, Section 3, the bond with Judaism, the unbreakable root. What is absolutely fascinating about Ratzinger's framework is how he views the deeply inseparable bond between Christianity and Judaism. Anchored heavily in the tragic reality of our recent history, Ratzinger stated at a 1994 Jerusalem conference that Jewish-Christian reconciliation isn't just, a nice idea. It's a strict, unavoidable necessity. Acknowledging a history literally bathed in tears and blood, he argued that after Auschwitz, finding the intrinsic unity between the Old and New Testaments is an absolute essential for the Christian conscience. To establish this unity, he maps out a continuous, though asymmetrical, timeline of a single covenant. He traces a direct line from Abraham all the way to Jesus. Arguing from a theological perspective, he asserts that Jesus didn't show up to abolish the Old Testament or the Torah. Actually, scratch that. It's more like he came to fulfill it. The history of Israel is meant to widen out and become the history of all peoples, maintaining this completely unbreakable link between the two testaments. This brings us to a massively crucial clarification in his theology. Ratzinger emphasizes that the cross represents God's love overcoming human sin. It's an act of divine reconciliation, not punishment. He entirely 100% rejects any historical or theological notion of collected Jewish guilt for the crucifixion, making sure to point out that Jesus' earliest followers were themselves part of the chosen people. Because of this, mutual reconciliation isn't just about historical apologies. It is practically required for both faiths to authentically witness the one God to the rest of the world. Let's shift gears to Section 4, Christianity and Other Religions, Defining the Differences. When Ratzinger delineates Christianity from other diverse world religions, his distinctions massively reduce the cognitive load. He essentially contrasts what he calls mystical religions, which he observes are often focused on an ineffable absorption or a sort of subjective individual therapy outside the world, with Christianity. Christianity, he argues, is anchored in an objective, personal God, and it's heavily tied to logos, meaning reason. For him, salvation isn't some escape from the world. It involves the incarnation of God actively entering the world. Now, this sharp theological distinction didn't just stay in the realm of academic theory. It came to a massive head on the global stage in the year 2000. That's the year his strict stance culminated in a highly debated and, frankly, polarizing Vatican declaration known as Dominus Jesus. Dominus Jesus was Ratzinger's ultimate defense of Christ's absolute uniqueness. He argues impartially that reducing Jesus to just another enlightened philosopher, putting him on the exact same shelf as Socrates, Buddha, or Confucius, fundamentally dissolves the very core of the Christian faith. For Ratzinger, other figures might point out a path to God, but the ultimate Christian claim is that Jesus actually is the path. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Dialogue from Truth, the Resolution. So if religions are as fundamentally different as he says, what does authentic, peaceful dialogue actually look like? Well, Ratzinger gives us a striking warning here. Merely being polite or adopting a pragmatic skepticism, pretending all truths are equal, doesn't actually create unity. In fact, he argues that giving up on the pursuit of objective truth leaves a massive vacuum. And what happens? That vacuum simply opens the door to dangerous, destructive ideologies that are more than happy to step in and fill the void with their own absolute certainties. True dialogue, therefore, requires exactly the opposite of watering down your beliefs. It demands a deepening of one's own truth. It has to be rooted in a genuine, rigorous search for the divine. For the Christian, Ratzinger says this means combining deep, silent listening, really respecting the mystery of a God who is totally beyond human comprehension, with the active, unyielding reality of the logos, or reason. You bring your whole, unfiltered identity to the table, and you respectfully ask the other person to do the exact same thing. And that brings us to the end of our explainer today. Look, Ratzinger's framework is undeniably challenging. It completely refuses easy answers and demands both intellectual and spiritual rigor. So I'll leave you with this final thought based on his work. If authentic dialogue genuinely demands ultimate truth, are we truly ready to engage and listen to others in our modern world without sacrificing our core identity? Something to think about. Thanks for exploring this with us.